Space itself seemed to hold its breath as the two massive ships faced each other. The Dreadnought, sleek and black with its strange shifting patterns, hung against the backdrop of the moon. The Dominion, bronze and spike-like, positioned between the human vessel and Earth. Both ships were legends in their own right. One, the feared flagship of an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds. The other, a myth that had suddenly become reality, on the bridge of the Dreadnought. Eleanor Winters watched the tactical display with growing anxiety. The Greyvac ship was powering up weapon systems unlike anything humans had ever faced. Even with the advanced technology of the Dreadnought, she wondered if they stood a chance. Incoming transmission, Susan announced. From her station, Margaret nodded. Put it through, she ordered. High Commander Zextur appeared on the main screen, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Last chance, human, he said. This vessel of yours is an abomination, a violation of the natural laws of time. Surrender now and your species may yet survive. Eleanor stepped forward. We both know that's not true, Commander. She replied. You came to Earth because of a prophecy, a prediction that humanity would one day develop technology that threatened your dominion over the stars. You never intended to let us survive once we were no longer useful, the alien commander hissed. You understand nothing. The temporal technologies your kind develops will not just threaten my species, but all life in the galaxy. Some powers were never meant to be wielded by sentient beings. We have seen the devastation they cause. Eleanor felt a moment of doubt. Was it possible the Greyvacs truly believed they were protecting the galaxy? Could their conquest of Earth have been motivated by something other than simple imperialism? Frost moved to stand beside Eleanor. The commander is trying to manipulate you, she said softly. I interfaced with the ship's database. I saw the truth. The Greyvacs have been hunting species with temporal potential for millennia, wiping them out before they could develop the technology. They fear what they cannot control, Margaret added. Eleanor nodded, understanding. The Greyvacs built their empire on technological superiority. The idea that another species might develop something beyond their understanding threatened everything they had built. We're not surrendering, she told Zextur. The Dreadnought stays with humanity, where it belongs. The commander raised himself to his full height. Very well, he said. Your extinction will be remembered as a necessary sacrifice. The screen went dark. They're charging weapons. Susan reported, her voice tense. Energy signatures unlike anything I've ever seen. Shields, Allison called, moving to her station. The Dreadnought hummed, as protective fields activated just as the first salvo from the Dominion struck them. The ship shuddered but held shields at 85%. Susan reported return fire. Margaret ordered, target their weapon systems. Allison shook her head. We can't match them in conventional weapons, she said. We need to use the temporal core. It's not fully calibrated. Margaret replied. You said yourself it could be dangerous. We don't have a choice. Allison argued. Look, the main screen showed more distortions forming in space. The rest of the Greyvacs fleet was arriving earlier than expected. Dozens of warships emerged from jump points, their weapons already charging. We'll be overwhelmed, Susan said. Eleanor looked from the tactical display to the faces of the women around her. These people had spent years preparing for this moment, working in secret, developing the technologies that might free humanity. They had always known this confrontation would come. Use the temporal weapon, she said firmly. Margaret hesitated, then nodded to Allison. Do it. Allison's hands moved across her console with practiced precision despite the fact that she had only learned to use these systems a day ago. The neural interface had given her knowledge that should have taken years to master. Targeting the Dominion, she said. Primary temporal core charging. The ship hummed with power as energy flowed from its mysterious heart to the weapon systems. The geometric patterns on the hull began to spin and shift more rapidly. Another hit rocked the bridge shields at 60%. Susan reported secondary systems failing. Just a few more seconds, Allison said, not looking up from her work. On the main screen, the Dominion fired again. A massive energy beam lanced toward the Dreadnought. The shields flared as they absorbed the impact. but the entire ship shuddered with the strain shields critical. Susan called multiple hull breaches on lower decks. Now Allison shouted, pressing her palm against a glowing panel. For a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then a strange distortion appeared between the two ships, a ripple in space itself that expanded outward from the Dreadnought. The wave passed through the Dominion, which seemed to flicker like a bad hologram. Did it work? Eleanor asked Allison, frowned. Something is wrong, she said. The readings don't match the projections, it's not aging them forward. She never finished her sentence. The space around the Dominion suddenly warped and twisted. Colors bled into each other as reality itself seemed to bend. The massive Greyvax flagship stretched and distorted its form, becoming impossible to look at directly. Temporal rift. Allison shouted, sounding panicked. We're creating a fold in space-time, it's pulling the Dominion in, but it's growing unstable. Shut it down, Margaret ordered. I can't, Allison replied. The process has become self-sustaining. The rift is feeding on the Dominion's power core on the screen. The distortion grew larger, consuming the Greyvax flagship entirely. Then it began to pulse, sending waves of temporal energy outward. The nearby Greyvax vessels caught in the distortion began to change. Some seemed to age thousands of years in seconds, crumbling to dust. Others regressed, becoming earlier versions of themselves with outdated technology. Still others simply winked out of existence as if they had never been there at all. The rift is expanding. Susan reported. It's going to reach Earth. Horror filled Eleanor as she realized what that would mean. If the temporal distortion reached a populated planet, billions of people could be affected. Time itself would be destabilized on a planetary scale. Can we stop it? She asked. Allison worked frantically at her console. Only one way, she said. We need to close the rift from inside, draw it back into the temporal core. What does that mean? Eleanor asked. It means, Allison replied grimly. Someone needs to take the Dreadnought into the rift. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Everyone understood what Allison was suggesting. A suicide mission, it'll do, Margaret said finally. This was my project, my responsibility. No, Eleanor interjected suddenly. You can't. I'm the diplomat, expendable. You all have knowledge skills, Earth will need you after. Susan shook her head. The ship's too complex for one person to pilot, she said, especially into a temporal anomaly. Allison looked up from her console. I've interfaced with the ship, she said. I can do it. Before anyone could argue further, alarms blared throughout the bridge. The rift has become unstable, Susan reported. It's collapsing in on itself, creating a temporal implosion. What does that mean? Eleanor demanded. It means, Allison explained, everything caught in the rift when it collapses will be erased from time. Not just destroyed, but removed from history as if it never existed, including the Dreadnought. Margaret asked. Allison nodded. Including the Dreadnought and everyone aboard it. But if we can position the ship correctly, we can ensure the rift collapses in on itself. Instead of expanding to Earth, the temporal core can be used to direct the implosion. Eleanor looked at the view screen. The remaining Greyvax ships were retreating, fleeing from the temporal distortion that had consumed their flagship. But the rift continued to grow its edges, reaching toward Earth like hungry fingers. Make the preparations, Margaret ordered. We need to move the Dreadnought into position. An alert chimed from Susan's station. Incoming transmission, she said from Earth Command. The main screen changed, showing the face of President Amelia Rodriguez. Her expression was grim but determined. Director Shen, she said. We can see what's happening. The temporal distortion is visible from the surface. Margaret nodded. Madam President, we're preparing to neutralize the threat. The Dreadnought will enter the rift and trigger a collapse. The president was silent for a moment, understanding the sacrifice this represented. Then she nodded. Project Lazarus was always a long shot, she said. But you all knew the risks when you volunteered volunteers. Eleanor thought that was the key. These people had chosen this path knowing it might end in sacrifice. Is there no other way? The president asked. Allison shook her head. The rift is too unstable. The only way to ensure Earth's safety is to collapse it from within. The president straightened her shoulders. Then on behalf of all humanity, I thank you for your service. Your names will never be forgotten. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Margaret turned to Allison. How long do we have? 15 minutes, Allison replied. Maybe less. Margaret nodded. Begin evacuation procedures, she ordered. All non-essential personnel to escape. Pods. Susan looked up from her station. Escape pods won't help, she said. If we're still in the vicinity when the rift collapses, we'll be erased along with the ship. All the more reason to clear as many people as possible. Margaret countered. Not everyone needs to make this sacrifice, as evacuation orders spread throughout the ship. Eleanor moved to the main viewport. She watched, as Earth turned below them, beautiful and fragile, the home she had been fighting to protect for so long. Ambassador Margaret said, joining her, "You should take one of the shuttles. Get clear of the rift." Eleanor shook her head. "I'm staying," she said. "This is where I belong." Margaret studied her face, then nodded. "Very well," she said, turning to address the remaining bridge crew. "This is a volunteer mission." Lieutenant Commander Susan Blackwood floated in the observation bubble of the stealth vessel. Whisper, the small scout ship, had been her home for 15 years, as she and her crew patrolled the edges of human space watching for Greyvax expansion. Her dark hair drifted around her face in the zero-gravity environment as she stared out at the endless void. The Whisper was the most advanced stealth ship humanity had managed to build before the Greyvax arrival, small enough to hide an asteroid, fields, and equipped with technology that absorbed sensor waves rather than reflecting them. The vessel was practically invisible unless someone was looking directly at it with their own eyes. Even then, its matte black hull made it difficult to spot against the backdrop of space. Susan pushed herself away from the viewport and floated through the narrow corridor toward the bridge. The ship operated with a skeleton crew of just 12 people. Each one had been chosen for their skills, intelligence, and psychological stability needed for long missions in deep space. As she entered the bridge, pilot Kelly Mason turned to look at her. Kelly was young for such an important position, barely 30, but her reflexes and spatial awareness were unmatched. "Anything interesting?" Susan asked, settling into her command chair and strapping herself in. Kelly shook her head. "Same old stars, same old rocks," she replied. Her fingers danced over the control panel, bringing up sensor readings from their latest sweep. "Nothing. That looks like Greyvax activity in this sector." Susan nodded. "Good," she said, though. She felt the familiar frustration. The Whisper and 3 other stealth vessels like it were humanities. Only eyes beyond the solar system. The Greyvax prohibited human ships from traveling beyond Mars, but these few had slipped away before the restrictions were put in place. Their mission was to gather intelligence and report back, but in 15 years they had found little that could help Earth break free from. Alien Control Communications Officer Olivia Wells looked up from her station, suddenly her eyes wide. "Mom, I'm picking up something strange," she said, her fingers moving rapidly over her console. "It's a temporal anomaly about 3 light hours from our position." Susan leaned forward. "What kind of anomaly?" Olivia shook her head. "I don't know. I've never seen readings like this. It's like a ripple in space-time." Susan made a quick decision. "Plot a course, Kelly," she ordered. "Keep us in stealth mode. Maximum sensor dampening." The Whisper changed direction, moving silently through the void toward the coordinates Olivia had identified. They traveled for hours, maintaining complete communications. Silence. The crew grew tense as they approached. Susan could feel it. In the air, the anticipation mixed with fear. "You need to see this," Kelly called, her voice cracking. Susan unstrapped and moved to the forward viewport. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Against the blackness of space floated an object, so massive it defied comprehension. It was shaped like an elongated arrowhead, at least 20 kilometers from tip to end. Its hull was a deep matte black, darker even than the Whisper, absorbing all light that touched it. Across its surface, strange, geometric patterns shifted and changed as if alive. "What is that?" Susan whispered. Olivia was frantically working at her station. It's not in any database, she said. Not Greyvax. Not any known species. And Mom, according to our temporal sensors, it just appeared. No warp signature, no jump distortion. One moment, nothing. The next moment. That Susan stared at the massive ship. How is that possible? We detected a temporal anomaly, Olivia replied. Could it be some kind of time displacement? The massive vessel began to move, accelerating without any visible propulsion. It's heading toward the inner solar system, Kelly reported. Toward Earth. Susan made a decision she hoped she wouldn't regret. Send a tight beam to Director Margaret Shen at Neptune Base, she ordered. Authorization code Lazarus Rising. The bridge went silent. Everyone knew what that code meant. It was reserved for only one scenario, the discovery of the mythical Dreadnought. Kelly looked up, her eyes wide. But Mom, that code is only for I know exactly what it's for, Susan interrupted. The Dreadnought protocol has been activated for years. Susan had believed the Dreadnought was just a story, a piece of propaganda created to give humans hope. She had never expected to actually find it. And yet here, it was larger and more terrifying than any legend had described. While they waited for a response, Susan ordered a complete scan of the massive vessel. The results were puzzling. The ship appeared to be made of materials unknown to human science. Its power source was undetectable, yet it was clearly accelerating at a rate that should have been impossible without massive energy output. Even more strange, there were no signs of life aboard. No heat signatures that would indicate crew quarters, no electromagnetic emissions from internal systems, nothing to suggest it was anything but an empty shell. The tight beam communication system chimed Neptune's response. Susan opened the channel, and Director Margaret Shen's face appeared on the screen. Her expression was grave. Confirm authentication, Lambda 79er. Margaret said, her voice tense. Susan responded, authenticate, Omega 3. 6. Margaret visibly relaxed, though her eyes remained serious. You found it, she said. It's real. Susan nodded, her throat tight. I don't know what it is, but it's massive. And it's heading toward Earth. Where has it been all this time? Margaret asked. How did we build something like this without the Greyvax knowing? Susan shook her head. I don't think we did build it, at least not recently. The technology, it's something we've never seen, and it just appeared out of nowhere. Margaret's eyes widened. The temporal initiative, she whispered. The temporal initiative. Susan had heard rumors about a top-secret project in the early days of the Greyvax occupation. Something about sending technology to the future, but those were just rumors, weren't they? Keep tracking it. Margaret ordered. Do not attempt contact. Repeat, do not attempt contact. We don't know what might trigger its systems. Susan acknowledged the order and ended the transmission. She turned to find her entire bridge crew staring at her. Is it really the Dreadnought? Kelly asked, her voice small. Susan looked back at the view screen where the massive shape continued its inexorable journey toward the heart of human space. I don't know, she admitted. But whatever it is, it's about to change everything. As they watched, the behemoth suddenly accelerated to impossible speed and vanished. It's gone. Olivia reported, bewildered. One moment, there, the next, track it. Susan ordered. Olivia worked frantically at her console. It's reappeared, she said, disbelief in her voice. It's already at Neptune. And Mom, it's broadcasting something. What? Susan demanded. A message, Olivia replied. On all frequencies. In plain English, the words repeated over and over are, the Dreadnought has returned. Humanity will be free. Susan felt a chill run down her spine. The myths were coming to life before her eyes. The Dreadnought was real. And now, the Greyvax would know. It too. What would they do? How would they respond to this threat? Would this be humanity's salvation or the beginning of its destruction? She looked around at her crew, seeing the mixture of hope and fear on their faces. Set course for Neptune. Maximum speed, she ordered. If history is being made, I want us to be there to see it. As the whisper accelerated toward the inner solar system, Susan wondered about the massive ship who had built it. How had it remained hidden all these years? And most importantly, was it truly on humanity's side, or was it something else, something they couldn't begin to understand? The next few days would answer those questions one way or another, and the fate of Earth might hang in the balance. Ambassador Eleanor Winters stood on the command deck of the Dreadnought watching Earth grow larger on the main view screen. The massive ship had moved from Neptune to Earth orbit in less than 6 hours, a journey that would take conventional vessels weeks. She still could hardly believe any of this was real, after her confrontation with High Commander Zek's tour. Eleanor had been secretly extracted from the Greyvax administrative cruiser. A small stealth shuttle had docked under the cover of a sensor, blind spot created by the sudden appearance of the Dreadnought in the system. The aliens had been too distracted by the mysterious vessel to notice one human slipping away. Now Eleanor found herself on the bridge of a ship that shouldn't exist, surrounded by people who had been working in secret for years preparing for this moment. Director Margaret Shen stood beside her, along with Dr. Allison Frost. The scientist had changed in the past 24 hours. There was a new confidence in her movements, a certainty that hadn't been there before. The neural interface with the ship systems had transformed her. The Greyvax fleet will be here in 12 hours. Allison said, her fingers moving over a control panel that seemed to anticipate her commands. 300 ships, including their flagship, the Dominion. Eleanor felt a chill at the mention of the Dominion. She had seen images of the massive Greyvax warship. It was said to be capable of destroying entire continents. And we have one ship, she said, trying to keep the doubt from her voice. One ship against 300, Margaret smiled grimly. Not just any ship, she replied. The Dreadnought was designed to fight this specific battle. Its systems are centuries beyond anything humanity has now. Beyond. Even what the Greyvax possess. Eleanor wasn't convinced. No matter how advanced this ship is, the Greyvax have numbers, she argued. They control thousands of worlds across dozens of star systems. They can afford to lose hundreds of ships. We can't. It's not about the numbers, Dr. Frost interjected. It's about the temporal weapon. Eleanor turned to face the scientist. What exactly is this temporal weapon? Everyone keeps mentioning it, but no one will explain what it does. Allison gestured to a section of the ship displayed on a nearby screen. The core of the Dreadnought houses a device that can manipulate time, she explained. Not just send information back like the archive that brought us the ship's designs, but actually create localized temporal distortions. And what does that mean in practical terms? Eleanor asked. Allison considered how to explain. In simple terms, it means we can age their ships thousands of years in seconds, accelerate time around them until they crumble to dust, or we can freeze them in time, trapping them in a single moment forever. Eleanor stared at her. This was beyond anything she had imagined. The power to control time itself. No wonder the Greyvax feared the Dreadnought. If such a weapon existed, they would never be safe. Can it be used against planets? Eleanor asked, thinking of Earth and its billions of inhabitants. Allison shook her head. The power requirements would be too great even for this ship. It's designed specifically to target vessels in space, not populations. That was some comfort. At least Eleanor turned back to the view screen where Earth continued to grow larger. A thought struck her. Do they know? I'm here, she asked the Greyvax. Do they know? I escaped. Margaret nodded. We intercepted communications from their command ship, she replied. They believe you were kidnapped by human extremists. They don't connect your disappearance to the Dreadnought. Yet good, Eleanor said. That gives us an advantage. I've spent 3 years with them. I know how they think. How they fight. I can help. Lieutenant Commander Susan Blackwood entered the bridge, her uniform crisp despite the chaos of the past day. The Whisper has docked, she reported. All stealth vessel personnel are aboard and ready for assignment. Eleanor had heard about the stealth ships that had been operating beyond Greyvax control for years. She was impressed by the commander's composure given the circumstances. Any word from Earth governments? Margaret asked. Susan nodded. They remain in official compliance with Greyvax protocols, she replied. The president sends her regards and says, unofficial resistance forces are standing by. Eleanor understood the delicate position Earth governments were in. They couldn't openly support the Dreadnought without risking immediate retaliation against civilian populations, but behind the scenes they were ready to act. A soft chime sounded throughout the bridge. Susan moved to a sensor station, Greyvax patrol cruiser approaching. She announced, "It's hailing us. Put it through," Margaret ordered. The main screen shifted, showing the insect-like face of a Greyvax commander. Not Zextur, but one of his subordinates, unknown vessel. "This is Commander Viktal of the Greyvax Dominion. You have violated treaty space and demonstrated hostile intent. Identify yourself immediately or face destruction." Eleanor stepped forward. "Commander Viktal," she said. "I am Ambassador Eleanor Winters. The alien's compound." Eyes widened in surprise. "Ambassador, you are alive. The commander claims you were taken. By force I left of my own free will." Eleanor replied, "And this vessel is under human control. We are exercising our right to self-defense as guaranteed by interstellar convention." The Greyvax commander clicked his mandibles in what Eleanor recognized as agitation. "The treaties you signed surrendered those rights, Ambassador. The High Commander approaches with the main fleet. You have 6 hours to power down your weapons and prepare for boarding, or we will be forced to take hostile action." The screen went dark before Eleanor could respond. "6 hours," Susan said. "That can't be right. Our intelligence said 12 hours minimum." Margaret moved to a sensor station. "They must have used their emergency jump drives," she said, examining the data. "Burning out their engines to get here faster. They really are afraid of this ship." "Good," Allison said. "It means the temporal weapon is as powerful as the archive claimed, or it means they'll destroy Earth rather than risk facing it." Eleanor countered. "We need to move the Dreadnought away from Earth orbit. Draw them away from civilian populations." Margaret nodded to Susan. "Make it happen," she ordered. "Move us to the dark side of the moon. That should provide some cover while we finish preparations." As the massive ship began to move, alarms suddenly blared throughout the bridge. "What's happening?" Eleanor asked, gripping a nearby console for support. "Gravitational distortion." Susan reported, her voice tense. "Something big is coming through." The main screen showed space itself, seeming to twist and fold. A massive shape emerged from the distortion, a ship even larger than the Dreadnought. Its hull was the color of burnished bronze covered in spikes and protrusions that gave it the appearance of some monstrous insect. "The Dominion," Margaret whispered. Eleanor had never seen the Greyvax flagship in person. The hollow images she had studied didn't do justice to its terrifying presence. It radiated menace as it moved into position between the Dreadnought and Earth. "The rest of the fleet is still hours away," Susan said. "They sent their flagship ahead." The screen flickered and High Commander Zextur appeared. His forearms were adorned with ceremonial battle armor, and his mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "Ambassador Winters," he chittered. "You disappoint me. I thought we had developed an understanding. These human terrorists have corrupted you, but it is not too late. Surrender this vessel, and I will ensure Earth suffers only minimal damage." Eleanor met his compound, gaze without flinching. "Commander Zextur," she said, "this ship represents humanity's right to exist as a free species. We have discovered the truth about why you came to Earth, why you fear us." The alien's posture stiffened visibly. "You know nothing human," he hissed. "We know about the temporal prophecy," Eleanor continued. "The prediction that humans would one day develop technology that could threaten your entire empire. That's why you came to Earth before we could reach the stars, to enslave us before we became a threat." Zextur raised himself to his full height, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "Then you understand why we cannot allow that ship to exist. Ambassador, why we cannot allow your species the freedom to develop such weapons. You threaten the natural order." "The natural order," Eleanor replied. "Or just your dominance. The Greyvax aren't protectors. They're afraid they conquer because they fear what other species might become." "Enough," Zextur roared. "You have made your choice. Now witness the consequences." The transmission cut off. Eleanor turned to Margaret. "What now?" Margaret looked to Allison. "The weapons." Allison nodded. "The primary systems are online," she said, "but we need more time to fully calibrate the temporal core. Without proper calibration, using it could be dangerous, unpredictable." Susan checked her console. The Dominion is powering weapons, she reported. The energy readings are off the scale. They could destroy a significant portion of the moon with that kind of firepower. Need to buy time, Eleanor said, turning to Margaret. Let me speak to them again. I'll negotiate. Margaret shook her head. Negotiation isn't an option anymore. They want this ship destroyed along with everyone on it. Then we fight, Eleanor said simply. The words hung in the air for a moment. Then Margaret nodded. Battle stations, she ordered. Throughout the massive ship crews rushed to their positions. Systems powered up as the Dreadnought prepared for its first and perhaps final battle. The ship that should not exist was about to face the empire that had enslaved humanity, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. Eleanor watched as the Greyvax flagship grew larger on the view screen, its weapons ports glowing with building energy. She thought of Earth, below of all the people who didn't even know their future was being decided in the cold void of space. She thought of the years of occupation, the humiliation, the fear, and she. Dr. Allison Frost never believed she would be called to service not like this. She had spent the last 8 years working in a secret underground facility beneath the lunar surface, developing theoretical technologies that might someday help humanity break free from Greyvax control. At 42, she had resigned herself to the fact that her work would likely never see practical application. The gap between human and alien technology was simply too vast. The facility known only as Deep Sight was home to 200 of Earth's brightest minds, all working on projects deemed too dangerous or revolutionary for the Greyvax to know about. Their existence was one of humanity's best-kept secrets, maintained through elaborate deceptions and the sacrifice of those who lived and worked there, cut off from the rest of humanity. Allison specialized in temporal physics, specifically the theoretical possibility of sending information through time. Her team had achieved several breakthroughs, but nothing that could be weaponized against the alien overlords. At least that was what she believed, until Director Karen Martinez burst into her lab, her face flushed with excitement. It's here, Allison, Karen said breathlessly. It worked. Allison looked up from her equations, confused. What worked? What are you talking about? The Dreadnought. Karen replied. It appeared at the edge of the system 6 hours ago. It's already reached Neptune orbit. The Lazarus protocol has been activated. Allison felt the blood drain from her face. The Dreadnought. That was impossible. It was just a story, a myth created to boost morale, and the Lazarus protocol. That was just a contingency plan they had created years ago, never expecting to use it. Are you certain? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen nodded. Neptune base confirmed it. 20 kilometers long, exactly matching the specifications in the temporal archive. It's broadcasting on the old frequencies using authentication codes that only we know. The temporal archive. Allison thought of the strange data package that had arrived at their facility 10 years ago, just before the Greyvax invasion. A massive amount of information, including designs for a ship so advanced it would take centuries for humanity to build. Yet the archive had appeared out of nowhere, transmitted through means they still didn't fully understand. Everyone assumed it was a hoax, or perhaps a trap. But what if that's not possible? Allison said. We never built it. We couldn't have the technology, the resources it would have required. Karen gripped Allison's shoulders. We didn't build it, she said. Not yet, but it exists. The theory was right, Allison. The closed temporal loop. It's real. Allison felt dizzy as the implications hit her. The temporal loop. Theory postulated that information could be sent back in time, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the Dreadnought plans had been sent back from the future, then the ship must have been built at some point, which means it would exist now, because it had always existed. A paradox, a loop in time with no beginning and no end. The evacuation order has been given. Karen continued. We're moving to Phase 2. Everyone is being transferred to the Dreadnought immediately. Your team has priority status. Allison shook her head, trying to process this information. So it's real, she whispered. The ship, the plan, all of it. Karen nodded. We always knew this day might come, she said. Now grab whatever research materials you can't live without and meet at Transport Bay, 3 in 30 minutes. The next few hours passed in a blur. Allison and her team rushed to gather their most important data and equipment. They were escorted to a transport shuttle that took them from the lunar surface up into orbit. Allison pressed her face to the small viewport as they approached Neptune and saw it for the first time. The Dreadnought hung in space like a massive black arrowhead dwarfing the nearby Neptune base. Even from a distance, Allison could see the strange, geometric patterns shifting across its hull. The sight took her breath away. It was exactly as the schematics had described. Yet seeing it in reality was overwhelming. As their shuttle approached, a section of the massive hull slid open, revealing a docking bay, large enough to hold dozens of ships. Their small craft passed through a shimmer of energy that Allison recognized as an atmospheric containment field and settled onto the deck. When the shuttle door opened, Allison expected to see people waiting, for them officers or crew of some kind. Instead, the vast docking bay was empty except for other shuttles that had arrived before them. The silence was eerie, broken only by the footsteps of her team as they disembarked. "Where is everyone?" she asked. "Karen, no one knows," Karen replied. "The ship appears to be automated, at least for now. Follow me." They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The interior of the Dreadnought was minimalist, with smooth black surfaces that occasionally displayed shifting patterns similar to those on the hull. The lighting was soft, coming from no apparent source. Allison noticed that despite the size of the vessel, the gravity felt perfectly Earth-normal, and the air was fresh and clean after walking. For what seemed like miles, they reached a vast chamber. The room was dominated by a central platform surrounded by workstations. Around the edges of the room, hundreds of people were already setting up equipment and computers Allison recognized, many of them as fellow scientists from DeepSight as well as military personnel from Neptune's defense forces. Director Margaret Shen stood on the central platform. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her expression was one of controlled excitement. "Welcome to the Dreadnought," she said, her voice echoing in the large space. "For those of you who don't know me, I am the director of the Temporal Initiative. For 10 years we have waited for this moment, preparing for it, hoping it would come, while working to ensure that if it did, we would be ready." She gestured to the room around them. "This vessel represents humanity's greatest achievement," she continued. "Though none of us built it, it was designed by our descendants using technology we have only begun to understand. It was sent back to us through a temporal fold created in a future where humanity had already defeated the Greyvax." Allison felt a shiver run down her spine. The temporal fold, that was exactly what her research had been, working toward a method of sending information through time. She had always believed it was theoretically possible, but to see the results of that theory standing on the deck of a ship that shouldn't exist. According to the temporal archive, Margaret continued, "This vessel contains weapons systems and defenses beyond anything the Greyvax possess. But it requires a crew. It requires us to learn to use it quickly, because the moment it appeared in our system, it triggered alarms throughout Greyvax. Space, they are coming, and they will bring everything they have." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Allison saw fear on many faces, mixed with determination. She understood the feeling. The Dreadnought represented hope, but also incredible danger. If they failed to master its systems, if the Greyvax overwhelmed them before they could fight back, humanity might face extinction rather than just subjugation. Dr. Frost. Margaret called, spotting her in the crowd. "Please join me." Surprised, Allison made her way to the central platform. Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. "The temporal archive contains instructions for activating the ship's primary systems," she explained. "But we need someone who understands temporal physics to interpret them. Someone who has been working on the very theories that made this ship possible." "That someone is you." Allison felt a weight settle on her shoulders, heavier than anything she had ever experienced. All those years of theoretical work suddenly had very real consequences. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Margaret led her to a console at the center of the platform. Unlike the other workstations, this one was decorated with strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as Allison looked at them. "Place your hand here." Margaret instructed, pointing to a flat panel. Hesitantly, Allison did as she was told. The moment her palm touched the surface, the symbols flared with light. She felt a strange tingling sensation run up her arm and into her head. Suddenly, information flooded her mind. Images, calculations, concepts that she somehow understood, despite their complexity, the ship's AI. Margaret explained, "It's interfacing with you, recognizing you as one of its creators, even though that creation hasn't happened." Yet Allison gasped as more information poured into her consciousness. She saw the ship's systems, its capabilities, its purpose. She understood now why it had appeared when it did. The temporal fold could only open at a specific moment when past, present, and future aligned perfectly. She also saw something else, something terrifying. The Greyvacs were not what they seemed. Their conquest of Earth was not random. They had been searching for something. Something. They believed humans would create something they feared. The Dreadnought, she whispered as the connection faded, leaving her dizzy but filled with newfound knowledge. They feared this ship. They knew it would exist someday. Margaret nodded. The temporal weapon, she said. The one thing in the universe that could threaten them. And now we have it. But we need to learn to use it quickly. The Greyvacs fleet has already changed course. They will reach Earth in less than 72 hours. Allison looked around. At the hundreds of people in the chamber, scientists, engineers, soldiers, all looking to this ship for salvation. "Then we better get to work," she said. Her fingers moved across the console with newfound confidence, activating systems that moments ago she wouldn't have understood. The Dreadnought hummed to life around them. And Allison felt a strange sensation as if time itself were bending the ship that should not exist. The Greyvacs Dominion ships hung in orbit around Earth like giant metal spiders. Their dark hulls reflected no light and cast long shadows over the blue planet below. Ambassador Eleanor Winters stared out the viewport of the administrative cruiser and felt the familiar weight of dread in her chest. The negotiations today had gone poorly. Just like every day for the past 3 years, Eleanor walked down the empty corridor toward her quarters. Her footsteps echoed against the metal floor. The aliens had given her a spacious room decorated with what they thought humans would find comfortable, but everything felt wrong. The chairs were too tall, the bed too firm, the air too dry. She sat at her desk and pressed the communication button. Hologram appeared, showing the face of her assistant back on Earth. Laura Patterson looked tired. Dark circles hung under her eyes and her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun. "The news is not good," Eleanor said. "The Greyvacs refuse to change the resource quota. They still demand 30% of all Earth minerals and 40% of our water reserves." Laura sighed and rubbed her temples. "What about the colony restrictions?" "Those are still in place," Eleanor replied. "No human settlements beyond Mars. They claim it's for our own protection, but we both know they just want to keep us contained." The two women stared at each other through the vastness of space. Neither needed to say what they were thinking. Humanity was trapped. The Greyvacs had arrived 10 years ago with technology centuries beyond Earth. Their ships could destroy cities from orbit. Their soldiers wore armor that made them nearly invincible. Earth governments had surrendered within days. High Commander Zextor says we should be grateful, Eleanor continued. He reminded me again about what happened to the Centauri when they resisted. Laura leaned closer to the camera. "Did you mention the Dreadnought?" Eleanor shook her head. "That old story." "No. I know better than to bring up fairy tales." The Dreadnought was a legend that had emerged shortly after first contact with the Greyvacs. Some claimed it was a massive warship built in secret by a coalition of Earth nations before the alien arrival. According to the stories, it had been hidden away, powered down, waiting for humanity's darkest hour. Most people, including Eleanor, believed it was just propaganda, a comforting myth to give people hope. The communication ended, and Eleanor lay down on her too firm bed. She closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. Her mind raced with worries about the latest demands from the aliens. Tomorrow they wanted her to sign a new treaty that would allow Greyvacs mining operations in the Pacific Ocean that would destroy entire ecosystems. and displace millions of people. She had to find some way to delay. A sharp buzzing sound jolted Eleanor awake. Her emergency communicator was flashing red. She grabbed it and saw a message from Lunar Command Chief Science Officer Heather Murphy was requesting an immediate secure channel. Eleanor pressed her thumb against the scanner and waited. Heather's face appeared, her expression a mixture of fear and excitement. Something just appeared at the edge of the solar system. She said, her voice trembling. It's massive, Eleanor, bigger than anything we've ever seen. Eleanor sat up straight. What do you mean, appeared just now? Yes. Heather nodded. 1 second. Nothing the next second there. It was. No warp signature, no jump field, nothing. It's just there. It's moving. Toward us slowly but steadily. Is it? Greyvax, Eleanor asked, feeling her heart rate increase. No. Heather shook her head. It's nothing like Greyvax design. It's broadcasting on old Earth frequencies. Eleanor, it's calling itself Dreadnought. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. The Dreadnought, the myth, the legend. She stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars as if she might see it from here. That's impossible, she whispered. The Dreadnought doesn't exist. It's just a story. Heather held up a tablet showing scanner readings. Believe what you want, but something 20 kilometers long just appeared in our solar system. And it's heading straight for Earth. Eleanor felt her hands shake. Send me everything you have, she ordered. And keep this quiet, completely dark. No communications with Earth about this until we know what we're dealing with. After ending the call, Eleanor paced her quarters. The Greyvax had sensors all over the system. They would detect this newcomer soon if they hadn't already. What would they think? What would they do? She jumped when her door chimed. It slid open, revealing the towering figure of High Commander Zextur. His exoskeleton gleamed under the lights. His forearms were held stiffly at his sides, sign of agitation among his species. Ambassador, the commander chittered, his mandibles clicking. We detect an anomaly in your system. A large object. Has your government been hiding something from us? Eleanor kept her face neutral, trying not to show her surprise at how quickly they had noticed a large object. Commander, I know nothing about this. Have your sensors identified it? Zextur moved closer, looming over her. I had hoped we had developed trust human. He spoke the word like an insult. Now, I wonder if your kind has been planning something foolish. Eleanor straightened her spine and met his compound eyes. We have hidden nothing from you, Commander. Perhaps this is a natural phenomenon, an asteroid or comet. The Greyvax commander made a sharp sound that Eleanor recognized as laughter. Nothing natural moves as this object does, he said. It's a ship, a massive ship, the largest I have ever detected. And it bears design similarities to human construction. Impossible. Eleanor said, keeping her voice steady. Humanity has no such vessel. You know the limitations of our technology. You have monitored all our construction. Zextur leaned down until his face was inches from hers. Then perhaps you should explain why this vessel is broadcasting on Earth. Frequencies. Why it is responding to hails with a human designation. Eleanor felt cold fear run down her spine. What designation, she asked, barely able to keep her voice steady. The High Commander narrowed his compound eyes. It calls itself Dreadnought time. Seemed to stop. Eleanor struggled to breathe as the implications crashed over her. The myth was real, or someone wanted the Greyvax to think it was. Either way, Earth was in danger. I need to contact my government, she said finally. This is as surprising to me as it is to you. Commander Zextur straightened to his full height. You have 1 Earth day to provide an explanation, Ambassador. After that, I will consider this an act of war, and you know what happens to worlds that war with the Dominiones. The commander left. Eleanor rushed to her secure terminal. The legends were coming to life, and now she had 24 hours to prevent the destruction of her world. The question that burned in her mind was simple. If the Dreadnought was real, where had it been all this time, and why had it chosen now to appear?